You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Catherine McKenzie back on the show with me. She was here in episode 349 talking about her brand new book at the time called The Good Liar, which was an amazing release. And, she's got a new book out. It's been out for a few weeks now, and it's called Cant Catch Me. And this book is amazing. It absolutely must be on your summer reading TBR list and on your bookshelf. Welcome back to the show, Catherine.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Since you've been here before, we won't start with the question that we always start with, but how have things been going for you lately? You know, we're living in strange times, as it is under the banner of COVID and lockdowns and all of this. I asked some friends pretty recently, for writers and people that typically work from home, this has not been it shouldn't make a big difference in a lot of writers' lives, but some people are. There's something about the kind of living under the specter of something that's kind of changing life. How's it been for you?
It's been difficult, like I think for a lot of people. I'm not sure that it's easier for people who worked at home now because, so I still work at my day job as a lawyer, so I'm not normally home.
I was going to ask you how this was affecting your kind of work-life balance.
Right. So now I do that job from home and then still do writing sort of more on the weekends. But, a lot of my writer friends who did work from home, now their spouses are at home. And so their routine where they were alone all day with the space to write has gotten upended, shall we say. So I don't know if it's actually a better time for writers. I think, whenever there's big upheavals in the world, it can be very distracting. And obviously there's tons of news and it can be hard to focus and find that time. Also, lots of people now have to educate their kids, so that doesn't apply to me, but for sure it was an adjustment. The first couple of weeks, my husband and I were both working in the house. We had to find our separate corners and then his office is actually close by. So, and small, so he was able to sort of go work there most days. So, it's an adjustment, but obviously there's a lot going on in the world. And I finished the first draft of my next book right before the pandemic. And I'm really glad about that because I have edits to do, but that is less taxing than just the fresh page in front of you. So, yeah.
Have you noticed any change in your typical production schedule as far as like your editor who you turn the book into, who will go through and mark things up and, offer suggestions and all of that great stuff. Has that relationship changed at all during this time?
No, that's stayed pretty much the same. I mean, I have an editor in the US and in Canada, and we sort of all work together. And, neither of them have kids. So they're working from home, but we kept to the same schedule of when I had to turn something in, when they got it back to me, that's all been the same. I think the real difference now is that when we get on the phone to talk about their comments, we do a Zoom call where we used to do a phone call. So I think that's been the big difference. But it is a weird time to release a book. obviously for many reasons. There's lots of serious things going on. And, I think people sometimes feel like, oh, I shouldn't be talking about myself right now, or I shouldn't be promoting my books right now. And I think, look, it's a business and you put in all the work. And so it's okay to say my book's out,
Well, and your publisher is Lake Union, right?
Right.
And for folks that aren't in the know, Lake Union is owned by Amazon. And they have several different publishing arms, 47 North, Thomas and Mercer, Lake Union, that all kind of have certain specialties. But there's a built-in advantage to your publisher being owned by Amazon. They typically do some pretty cool stuff for promotions and helping get the word out for authors and that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's kind of a good time to have Amazon in your corner. When people can't go to bookstores anyway, that's kind of got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I think when you're an Amazon published author, I don't know for everyone, but I would speaking for myself, my sales before this have historically been at least 80% either ebook or e-audio book, which is a growing trend. That being said, I think, I'm not telling tales out of school. Was in the news that Amazon actually deprioritized delivery of physical books for a long time in the pandemic. And so for those people who wanted to buy physical copies, Amazon was not the place to go. And that may have ended up helping some independent bookstores because I think it would just say, well, that may come to you in 2 months or whatever. Everyone's always obsessed with Amazon's algorithms, and they had an algorithm for sure. I don't know if you ordered stuff from Amazon during the pandemic, but it was fascinating to me about what I could get right away and what might take months arriving. And there's something I ordered in March that I still don't have. Obviously not deemed essential by the algorithm. So, I think that there's some advantages, but I think that in general, I don't know if people are reading more. I think also economic uncertainty. I've noticed just through Instagram, so it's completely anecdotal, but it feels to me like people are going through their TBR piles. So I had a lot of posts about my book from last year, I'll Never Tell, all of a sudden. A whole new wave of posts about that people are like, oh, I've had this book for a year and now I'm finally reading it. So, which is great. I'm happy for publicity for any of my books, but
yeah. Well, speaking of that, the last time we talked, The Good Liar was your new book, and our schedules wouldn't mesh up last year for I'll Never Tell, and I'm sorry about that, but but we're here talking about the new book now. When you published The Good Liar, you had several books that you'd published before that. Now with You Can't Catch Me, the new book, that's 2 more books under your belt from the last time we talked.
It's number 10.
10. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
How do you feel like you've grown as a writer? We all want people to kind of judge us on our newest work. But, a lot of our back catalog stuff, our older stuff, obviously had deep meaning to us or we wouldn't have written it. How do you feel like you've grown as a writer over your 10-book career? And do you feel like you're better at it now than you were a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
I hope I am. I mean, I think the biggest change has been just in genre. So I started out writing, more romantic comedies or classic women's fiction, and now I write, mystery, suspense, thrillers. So just that tonally, obviously, the books have changed. And I think, the plots are definitely more complex and I hope I'm a better writer. I do set goals for myself with every book in terms of writing. I like to try and push myself to try something that I haven't done before, whether that's overt for the reader or not, and in You Can't Catch Me, I hadn't written a book from one narrator's point of view for almost 10 years. The last book that I had written that way was my book Forgotten, which was the 3rd book that came out. But but I really wrote that book in, I don't know, 2009 or something. So I wanted that challenge of going back and having to spend an entire book with one character. And because it is a challenge, you have to, for instance, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but you have to have, I think, a much more developed backstory for that character because you spend so much time with them. So I think I push that. On the flip side, I would say that I used to be able to write funny books, and I kind of miss being able to do that. I don't know. Did the world get less funny or whatever? I hope I haven't lost my sense of humor. I don't feel like I have in my life, but it's
more writer cynicism.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I think obviously the types of stories I tell are not meant to be humorous stories. And I do think when you write humor, you get taken less seriously as a writer in general, even though writing humor is hard. Like it's hard to write funny. But yeah, I mean, so yes, improved in some ways, but in other ways, like being able to go back to something lighthearted, what just made people smile, like there's an appeal to that too, you know?
Noveler is the best way to write a novel. Why? Quite simply because we've made it the easiest place to do it. Writing a novel is hard enough. Noveler takes care of all the logistical bits of writing a novel, just leaving that small matter of the words to you. It's a clean, beautiful writing interface with writing analytics, goals and streaks, advanced grammar checking, version control, day, evening, and night modes, and many other features designed to take all the stress out of writing. Tell us what you need and we'll build it. Together we'll build a better tool. With a design-led approach, all the right tools that you need, Noveler saves all your words constantly, allows you to manage and order your novel easily. It's accessible from any device, desktop or mobile. It syncs to Google Drive and Dropbox. It allows exports in various formats, including ebook and more. It also has nice touches like allowing you to write both offline and online, unique for a web-based platform. Everyone needs help with their writing from inspiration through to grammar checking, so we're doing our best to provide that support. We integrate that support directly into Noveler. Our advanced grammar checker powered by Pro Writing Aid does everything from spell check to style advice. Our writing courses include the incredible Tim Clare's Couch to ADK. We're really excited to offer all Author Stories listeners 30% off Noveler for a whole year. And it doesn't matter if you choose to sign up for the monthly or annual plan. You'll get 30% off. All you need to do is use the discount code HANK when you sign up. Noveler, Novlr. That's noveler.org. Well, you know, there's a difference in writing comedy and writing more serious topic books or thrillers or more kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. You know, books that amp up the tension and the anxiety.
Right.
There's a difference in writing comedy and writing a book that induces anxiety, but using humor sparingly to kind of give the reader a break for a moment. And dark humor really works well. And you know, that's one thing that I've noticed in your books, and You Can't Catch Me. There's some moments of wry humor, or you know, is that important to you? I know that in your personal life, you are not this dire, dour person, and you know, how do you balance, adding a little bit of levity every now and then to kind of let the reader come down a little bit so that you can punch them again with the next scene?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important, right? I think, you know, people aren't one-faceted, nor should they be. And, you know, characters in books shouldn't be either. And yeah, I think I don't want to write, you know, there's just certain stories that don't appeal to me. So things that are just unrelentingly sad, like books where children die or,
Right.
you know, things like that. Like, it's just not something that I want to write. So even though I'm writing serious stories, I think it is important to have moments of levity, and I do like to still be funny, and you know, whether the humor is dark or silly, I think it depends on the book, but I think it gives dimension to the character, and as you say, it gives the reader a bit of a break. And um, so yeah, I think it's part of what I do, I think, which is that I'm trying to make the book and the characters holistic, um, even when they're in dire situations, because I do think that people will um, will use humor to diffuse tense situations as well, in reality.
Sure. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago the tonal shift in the topics of your books over the last decade or so.
Mm-hmm.
Do you attribute that to anything? Is it just your taste as a writer? Do you feel more comfortable telling a more complex story like this, or is this just something that happens with writers, that our taste evolve and change?
I think it's a combination, honestly. I think, I wrote three back-to-back women's fiction novels, and I was starting to feel like I was repeating myself, whether the reader felt that way or not. And so I decided to write the book that is called Hidden, which um, really was my breakout book, to say, okay, there's no happy ending in this book. So I'm going to take the romantic lead and he's going to die in the prologue. And so it's impossible to have a happy ending. I'm just taking that off the table. And then what does that leave? What story can I tell when I take that off the table? Um, and then that allowed me to shift. Once I had sort of broke that chain, it opened me up to tell different stories. And I think a lot of things, I don't write to the market, but the market's changed. I actually wrote a book with an unreliable narrator back before I was published. I wrote a bunch of books before I was published, and it just happened that the book that got picked up was my book Spin, which is about a journalist that follows a celebrity into rehab. So a dark setting, but but it's a comedy. Um, and obviously, right? But um, but then, as that became popular, it was like I've always found those stories attractive anyway. And so I think the other thing was that for me, it's been important to write whatever story that I find fun and fulfilling. Like, I am ultimately writing for me. I have to live with the book. I have to produce the book. I hope that people enjoy it, but I didn't want to be stuck writing the same kind of story over and over again. And so I think part of it is just, I'm old. Like, when I started writing, I was in my early 30s, 15 years ago. The world has changed. I've changed. So my books have changed along with me, I think. And so even though my last five, books have been thrillers, and my next couple ones are too, because, they're already in the planning stages, obviously. I don't know what I'm going to do after that. Like, we'll see. It just depends what story comes to me, and what I'm interested in writing, and hopefully my readers will follow along.
Well, speaking of what story comes to you, how does a new story begin for you typically? Is it a character that kind of walks onto the stage of your mind and does something intriguing, so you want to follow her along? Is it maybe a newspaper article? Not that anybody reads newspapers anymore. Is it some piece of news that's intriguing? Is it a plot device that comes to you, and how can I make this happen, because this would be a fun thing to play with?
Right.
What's that first kernel of a story idea where it starts to evolve?
Yeah, I'd say it's all of the above except for character. So usually it's a premise that comes to me, but often I have parts of premises, So I'll have an interest in something, or um, like I'll use an example because I don't want to spoil the ending of this book, but I'll Never Tell is, I wanted to write a Agatha Christie type closed set mystery. So then that was like the frame that I wanted to tell a story. And so then I had to think about what story I was going to tell in that frame. And then, but to talk about You Can't Catch Me. So the book is about a woman with a common name, Jessica Williams. She meets another woman with the same name in an airport bar. And when Jessica 1 gets, as I call her, gets back from her vacation, all of her money is gone. It was taken by the second Jessica. And because the police won't do anything about it, she goes looking for her and finds a bunch of women with a similar name. And that idea came to me through many pieces. The book is dedicated to my friend Christy Brown, who has a common name, and we live in Canada and we travel to the States together quite a bit. And for a while, every single time she and I, or she and other people went across the border, she would get pulled over because there was a warrant out for somebody with a similar name to hers and the same birthday.
No. Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. And it was clear that it wasn't her. And in fact, I think over the years, we sort of gleaned that it was a man, because they would like the picture would pop up on the screen of the border guard and they'd look at her and look at the picture. And it was like obvious, probably different race too than she was, it didn't make any sense, but the border guards have no discretion, as they explained to us. And so she would always have to go in and wait and, almost miss a flight or whatever. So, that was stressful. And she got given the weirdest advice, like, change your name. It's like, well, not that, what? I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Why can't you put a note in my file that says, this is the okay Christy Brown?
Is there anything I could do ahead of a flight to call and say, I'm coming?
No, apparently, no. And then I guess eventually they caught the guy because it stopped happening to her. And then I was at a book conference in Kentucky, and a woman came up to me and said, I have a strange question for you. I'm like, okay. And she asked me what my middle name was. And I was like, why are you asking me that? And because her name was also Catherine McKenzie, spelled the same way. And in fact, we had the same middle name. And we even
you didn't have the same birthday, did you?
Not the same birthday.
Because that's the part that you left out when telling about this is not only did
the same birthday. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is extra creepy.
Extra creepy. But even just having, somebody else and somebody, there was someone I went to law school with who had a very similar name as me. And because of the way our email was structured, I'd get emails for her, she'd get emails for me. And she actually went into politics and won her seat in our parliament here, and then was named a minister in the cabinet. And so at the time I'll say more famous than her on Facebook. And I kept getting tagged in all these posts. People were like, congratulations on your appointment as the Minister of the Environment. And I'm like, what? No, So I think this idea of identity theft, or not even identity theft, but identity confusion, identity, like what happens when you meet your name doppelganger was really floating around for a couple of years. And then one day I thought, oh, be really easy to steal things from people if you had the same name as them, because you'd already have ID. And on paper, you are them.
Scribophile is a respectful online writing workshop and writers community. Writers of all skill levels join to improve each other's work with thoughtful critiques and by sharing their writing experiences. We're the writing group to join if you want to find beta readers, get the best feedback around, learn how to get published, and be a part of the friendliest and most successful writing workshop online. Improve your writing by receiving detailed critiques. Learn from a vast collection of free writing resources. Make lifelong friends in our busy community of writers. Writing is a solitary art, but that doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Lucky for you, there are thousands of writers on Scribophile every day, and we're a really friendly bunch. You've never seen a writing group like this one? Join Scribophile today at scribophile.community.
And so that was the kernel. That was my long answer to your kernel story, but that was the kernel. And then once I have that idea where I'm like, okay, where does that go? Then I start from that premise and I think about, okay, where does that go? What happens in that story? And I have to see the end. I have to see the twist. And then I start thinking about character. So that's how that story came about. Each book has its own genesis. Sometimes I'm like The Good Liar, and maybe we talked about this at the time. That was something that it was years of, because there's 3 separate stories in that book that all connect. And one of the stories I had for years, but I couldn't ever fully develop it. And then I got a second piece of the story, and then finally a third piece of the story, and then it came together. And others have come together very, very quickly. So it just depends, honestly.
Well, that's a pretty fantastic kernel of a story to begin with. But from there, you throw in that Jessica Williams was also in a cult.
Right.
Where did that piece of the puzzle come from?
Well, I think 2 things. I've always actually been kind of obsessed with cults, not in being in one, but in how they operate and how people get sucked into them. And so I've done, I think I've watched every documentary about a cult ever, and often multiple times. And I've done deep dives into Scientology and read lots of memoirs of people who escaped there. So, and then I actually do know 2 different people who grew up in cults. There was a lot of cults in the 70s, like not all horrible, like, we read about or see in documentaries, but still a cult. And these kids were born into these environments and are not in them anymore. And
in my experience, very few cults begin as something terrible.
I agree.
But most of them end up that way.
They often end up that way. Yeah. And definitely these experiences shaped the people I know and made them feel like outsiders, I think, sometimes. And, because they were, right. When they came into society, they had a very, very different experience than other people. And so I've always thought that was super interesting. And I didn't go back and, interview them. I just thought it was interesting as a background for someone. And so then I took all of my cult knowledge and cobbled together the Land of Todd, as my cult is called, because the leader's name is Todd.
Right.
And
in Todd we trust.
Yeah, exactly. In Todd we trust. Yeah, I was able to do a lot of fun things with that. And some of that serendipity too, right? Like I called it the Land of Todd, but then In Todd We Trust came to me, and then it was like, oh, the Land of Todd, like the Land of Nod. I was able to, like, just things come. Sometimes your writer brain is working in the background, solving puzzles for you that you didn't even know you'd created, or making connections that, I sometimes discover in the writing process, which is fun.
Right. You mentioned earlier that in You Can't Catch Me, you went back to a single narration, a single focus narrative.
Yeah.
Whereas for several books, you have taken a multiple narrative, multiple character head hopping. It brings about bad connotations, but I mean that in a good way.
I understand. Multiple points of view.
Multiple points of view. Thank you for saving me. What was the decision to narrow it down in this book? And after doing several the other way, did this feel claustrophobic to you? Did it feel freeing? What was the experience of kind of settling on a head and staying with that narrative?
Yeah. Well, so in I'll Never Tell actually has 7 narrators, which I felt was like as far as I could push that. And almost, I think I pulled it off, but it was like, that was a lot of work to create 7 distinct voices.
Well, there's I'll Never Tell, and there's Game of Thrones. So
okay, yeah. Right. Well, that's a whole, that's a saga.
Yeah.
Those books are 2,000 pages long.
Right,
or whatever.
right.
So yeah, okay. I'm not that guy. So I think, again, it's hard to totally answer this question without spoiling the end. But because I knew what the end was, part of the challenge, I thought it was a more challenging story to write if I wrote it from first person perspective, because of that. And did it feel claustrophobic? I did have moments of like, oh, maybe this is why I stopped writing books with one character like it's a lot of work. Got to give this lady story and action. And
well, it challenges you to, how do I describe things, or how do I give the reader information without having the ability to just move the camera over here? It really does bring up challenges.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I do think it tends to be my natural writer voice because, like I said, the first, in fact, 4 books that I wrote, and maybe even 5, because I have a practice novel in a drawer, I wrote those all single narrator, first person point of view. So it was returning a little bit to my more natural voice. Like the one that if I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, like sometimes I'll be writing books that are partly in third person. If I don't pay attention, suddenly I'm writing in first person. I'm like, oh, whoops, it easy. So it was easier in that way. And also there's a lot of moving pieces to this book in the end to pull off what happens. And I think it was simpler to do that in a one narrator story. If I'd had multiple narrators, I think it would have been harder to pull off the trick of the book.
I feel like, Catherine, that there's so much that we can't talk about this book because I don't want to spoil it for people, and I do want people to go grab a copy of it. And there's links to it in the show notes of this episode for everyone to easily get their copy in audiobook or Kindle edition or paperback, however they want to do it. But did I see some good news about You Can't Catch Me a few days ago?
Yeah, it's been optioned for a television show by Paramount.
Man, that's pretty exciting.
It's very exciting.
Paramount has kind of the biggest summer show for the last couple of years with Yellowstone, don't they? And the same company.
Yeah, and I mean they did Defending Jacob.
That's gonna be amazing. So what can you talk about that? What's going to happen with You Can't Catch Me? And is this going to be a series? Did I see that?
The idea is for it to be a series, yeah. But we're really just in the infancy. So right now, I think they're trying to attach a writer, and it's it goes from there. So I think as I understand the process, because it's a whole different business than my normal business, is
sure.
Get a writer, get a pilot, and then shop it to various networks. So we'll see. It might not go anywhere, and hopefully it will go somewhere. So.
Well, I'm super excited to see where it goes because I could. There's so much potential in this story. I could see it going any of a dozen different ways, and I love them all. So that's going to be. The new book is called You Can't Catch Me. There are links to it in the show notes of this episode, as I mentioned. Catherine, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
So I'm my website's CatherineMcKenzie.com, easy to remember, and I am on Twitter at CEMckenzie1 if you're interested in my political opinions. If you aren't, that's fine. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Catherine McKenzie Author.
Excellent. We'll put links to all those as well, where people can find you and connect with you. Catherine, I love the new book. I'm recommending it to everyone. If you are a Kindle Unlimited subscriber,
you can read it for free.
You can go grab it on your Kindle. Even the audiobook, which I highly recommend the audiobook for this. You won't be disappointed. Catherine, thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
World Anvil is a browser-based world-building platform designed for all world builders, writers and novelists, dungeon masters, game developers, and everyone else. World Anvil keeps your world setting safe and organized, helps you find your characters, locations, plots, timelines, and maps quickly and easily as you write. Then, if you choose, you can showcase your amazing world building to the world, beautifully and interactively, to keep your readers engaged. You can even use our professional tier to build your career selling access to behind-the-scenes content your readers will love and growing your community. Build your world setting in any genre with over 25 custom-built world-building templates, complete with prompts to inspire your creativity. Allow your readers to explore the public parts of your world in an innovative new way with interactive maps, timelines, and wiki-style articles. Give special access to co-authors, beta readers, customers, or patrons to see exclusive behind-the-scenes content. There's a free version to get started with all of the major features. Guild membership offers you a host of extra options, including comprehensive privacy settings, co-authors, presentation options, and so much more. Join our community of over 250,000 world builders, including professional authors. Take part in competitions and learn more about world building at this fantastic online community. Use the coupon code HANK to get 20% off all 6 and 12-month subscriptions. WorldAnvil.com. I'm a recent convert and I know you will be too.